It's the year 757. In a private chamber lit by a single oil lamp, a man is dying. But he doesn't know it yet. He's enormous, nearly 400 pounds, if the old records are even close to true. He is blind now, his eyes eaten away by boils that spread across his whole body. He can't stand without help. He screams through the night because the pain never stops. This man declared himself Emperor of China. He commanded an army that nearly wiped an entire civilization off the map. He made the most powerful man in the world call him son. And tonight, in the dark, someone is standing over his bed with a knife. That someone is his own son. This is the story of An Lushan, the outsider who clawed his way to the top of the most powerful empire on earth, burned it down out of pure ambition, and was murdered by the one person who should have protected him. Be sure to stick around, because this story doesn't just have one villain. By the end, you won't be sure who to blame, the traitor or the empire that made him. Walk with me as I take you on another journey through the eyes of history. An Lushan wasn't even supposed to be An Lushan. He was born around 703 on the wild frontier of Tang Dynasty, China, to a Sogdian father, a merchant from Central Asia, and a Turkic mother, a shaman from the steppes. Two bloodlines, neither of them Chinese. In the eyes of the empire's elites, that made him an outsider before he said a single word. His father died young. His mother remarried a man from the An clan, and that's where the name came from. Borrowed, not earned, from day one. Growing up on the border meant growing up in chaos, raids, tributes, shifting alliances between nomadic tribes and the town courts. But An Lushan had something most border kids didn't. He was a gifted linguist. He could speak 6 languages fluently by adulthood. On a frontier where trade and diplomacy ran through translators, that made him valuable. Therefore, he didn't stay a nobody for long. He started as a market broker translating deals between merchants. But he was caught stealing sheep early in his career and was nearly executed for it. He begged. He talked his way out of the execution by promising to destroy China's enemies instead of stealing from its markets. They let him leave. That should have been the end of a footnote in history, but instead, it was the opening move of one of the deadliest men who ever lived. An Lushan turned out to be a genuinely brilliant military commander. He crushed rebellions on the northern frontier again and again, and each victory got reported back to the capital, Chang'an, the largest, richest city on the planet at the time. But what got him into the palace wasn't just his sword, it was his performance. An Lushan understood something most generals never bothered to learn. Power isn't just won on the battlefield, it's won in the throne room, and the throne room runs on charm. He was famously, almost cartoonishly overweight. Some accounts claim his belly hung so low it covered his knees. And instead of hiding that, he weaponized it. When Emperor Xuanzong, half joking, asked what was in that enormous stomach of his, An Lushan replied instantly, "Nothing but a loyal heart, Your Majesty." The court roared with laughter. The emperor loved it. He danced for the emperor, a man his size, spinning and swirling in the Hu well, a fast Central Asian dance, and doing it so well enough to leave the court stunned. He played the fool on purpose, because a fool is non-threatening. But underneath the jokes, he was memorizing everything. Who held power? Who resented whom? Where the cracks in the empire were forming. Emperor Xuanzong, brilliant in his youth, but by now decades into his reign, and increasingly obsessed with pleasure over politics, adored him. He gave An Lushan command of not 1, not 2, but 3 entire frontier military provinces. That's roughly a third of the Tang Empire's entire standing army, handed to a single man who, 20 years earlier, had been nearly executed for stealing livestock. But the real masterstroke came from the emperor's favorite consort, Yang Guifei. Yang Guifei was, by every account of the era, one of the most beautiful and most powerful women in Chinese history. The emperor was infatuated with her to the point of neglecting the empire itself, and An Lushan understood exactly how to use that. He requested and was granted the honor of becoming her adopted son, a grown man, decades her senior in some tellings, performing an elaborate ceremonial birth ceremony, where palace women wrapped him in giant swaddling clothes like an infant, and paraded him through the palace while Yang Guifei laughed. The emperor found it hilarious. He gave Yang Guifei's family gifts to celebrate the birth of a new son. Here's the part that should have set off alarms. An Lushan was now inside the innermost circle of the empire, not just a general with an army, a son to the emperor's most beloved woman, a man who could walk into private chambers others could only dream of entering. But loyalty performed for laughs is not the same as loyalty that's real. And nobody in that glittering court seemed to notice the difference until it was far too late. Underneath the parties and the dancing and the jokes about his belly, the Tang dynasty was rotten. Emperor Xuanzong, once one of the great rulers of Chinese history, had essentially stopped ruling. He handed government affairs to a chief minister named Li Lingfu, and after Li Lingfu died, to Yang Yifei's cousin, Yang Gozong, a man An Lushan despised, and who despised him right back. Therefore, a rivalry formed at the very top of the empire between the emperor's adopted son and the empress's cousin, both fighting for influence over a ruler who barely paid attention anymore. Yang Gozong began warning the emperor over and over that An Lushan was planning treason, and here's the darkly funny part: he wasn't wrong, but he'd cried wolf so many times out of pure political jealousy that the emperor stopped believing him. An Lushan, meanwhile, plays the wounded, loyal son every single time, weeping in front of the emperor, insisting his rival was slandering him out of spite. It worked every time, but privately, An Lushan was done playing. He controlled roughly 200,000 battle-hardened frontier troops. He'd spent years building weapon stockpiles and recruiting foreign mercenaries loyal only to him. He wasn't just tolerating the rivalry in the capital anymore, he was counting down. In December of 755, An Lushan marched south. He declared that Yang Gozong was a traitor to the throne and that he was riding to save the emperor from him, the oldest lie in the rebellion playbook. Nobody believed it for long. Within weeks, his armies had taken the eastern capital, Liaoyang. Therefore, in early 756, sitting on a captured throne, he did what he'd wanted since he was a kid merely executed for stealing sheep. He declared himself emperor of a brand new dynasty. He called it Yan. The real emperor, Xuanzong, panicked and fled the capital with his court. But the fleeing soldiers, furious and terrified, blamed the disaster on the Yang family, the ones who'd elevated An Lushan in the first place. They mutinied. They forced the emperor to have Yang Gozong executed on the spot. Then they turned on Yang Yifei. They told the emperor plainly, the army will not move another step while she still breathes. And the man who had once showered her with gifts and celebrated the birth of his adopted son with her now had to give the order himself. Yang Yifei was strangled, reportedly with a length of silk, at a roadside relief station, while the man who loved her stood nearby and let it happen. The woman who had helped create An Lushan's rise was dead because of the war he started, but he wasn't finished, not even close. Here is where the story turns even darker, because An Lushan's empire, the one he'd bled half of China to build, started rotting from the inside almost immediately. His health collapsed. Historians believe he was suffering from severe diabetes, which by this point had caused boils and ulcers to spread across his entire body and left him completely blind. The same charm, the same physical presence that had once made emperors laugh, was gone. He was in constant screaming agony, trapped in his own rotting body, ruling an empire built on rubble and corpses. And being blind and in pain didn't make him kinder, it made him crueler. He grew paranoid and violent, lashing out at servants and officials around him, having men flogged or executed over the smallest offenses. That included his own household. He had a favorite concubine and her infant son, and he was preparing to name that infant his heir. Pushing aside his older son, An Qingzu, who had fought and bled for his father's rebellion, An Qingzu began to understand with total clarity that his father intended to erase him. An Lushan, the man who had built his entire life on reading a room and knowing exactly which loyalties were real and which were performance, made the one mistake that had never caught up with him before. He stopped watching the people closest to him. In January of 757, An Qingzu conspired with a trusted attendant, a man named Li Zu'e, who had access to An Lushan's private chambers. At night, blind and alone in the dark that had defined his final months, An Lushan heard someone enter his tent. He couldn't see who it was. He reached for a sword that always hung near his bed for exactly this kind of moments. But this time, someone had already removed it. Li Zu'e stabbed him. An Qingzu's men finished the job. They didn't even give him a burial fit for the emperor he declared himself to be. They dug a shallow pit directly under the bed where he was murdered, wrapped his body in a carpet, and buried him right there, hidden, silent, so the rest of the rebel army wouldn't panic and scatter before his son could secure control of the throne he'd built out of blood. The man who had once made the most powerful ruler on earth laugh until he cried. The man an empress had cradled like a newborn in front of a cheering court, died in the dark, unable to see his own killer, buried under the floor like something to be hidden rather than mourned. His son didn't even get to enjoy it. An Kingzu was murdered 2 years later by one of his own father's former generals. The rebellion itself dragged on for nearly 8 more years after An Lushan's death, chewed through by infighting among his former commanders. By the time it finally ended in 763, some historical estimates, and yes, historians still argue fiercely about the real numbers, suggest the war and the famine and displacement it caused may have killed upward of 30 million people. Some estimates go dramatically higher. Even the most conservative numbers place it among the deadliest conflicts in all of human history, and this happened over 1,000 years before the World Wars. The Tang dynasty survived, but it never fully recovered. The empire that once ruled the richest city on earth spent the rest of its existence as a shadow of what it had been, before one ambitious, brilliant, charming outsider decided he would rather burn the palace down than keep dancing for scraps of approval inside it. Thank you guys for watching. Do well to like, comment, share, subscribe, and walk with me again through the eyes of history.